Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Griaco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and it is yet another one of our Final Fantasy episodes, which means I am joined, as always, by Chris Zombiepie Redacted. That sound can only mean one thing. It's Final Fantasy time!
Oh, God. You gotta give the people what they want, and we're giving the people what they want.
Give them what they need. So, we are talking about Final Fantasy X. We have started we've embarked on our Final Fantasy X playthroughs. If you've listened to our Mobius Final Fantasy podcast, we mentioned we were playing it. That means we've gotten far enough in Final Fantasy X to also discuss a little bit of it. We're going to be talking today about the segments from the beginning of the game till you arrive at Luca. So it's not a huge snippet, but there's enough here. This game is pretty deep.
We also have to preface that it is, your second or third time playing this game?
Yes.
And it's my first time playing this game. And our first episodes usually go over first impressions, technical issues, or kind of impressions of mechanics more so than other episodes. So, we're not going over a lot of the story, but we are going over, first impressions and that sort of stuff more so than normal.
Yes. So there will be plenty of discussion to be had. So if you, listener, want to get in touch with the show and or yell at Zombiepie that he's playing the game wrong or something.
And I am.
Lines. And he is. I know he is. I know for a fact. We're going to discuss how wrong you are playing it. But you can get in touch.
I don't learn.
Nope. You can get in touch with the show at Deep Listens Pod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have comment sections for every episode, and we check them regularly. And you can go ahead, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Send us an email there. So, without further ado, Final Fantasy X, the first one with voice acting.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I'll say as someone who's now playing this game for the first time is whenever I mention that I'm playing Final Fantasy X for the very first time, every single person that I say this to, their first immediate question is to ask what my impressions are of Tidus's voice actor. Like, that is 90% the first question. And then the second question is asking me if I've seen the laughing scene. Every single goddamn time.
Now, I will say, Tidus's voice actor, the quality of the voice acting varies from spot to spot. Like, that introductory, listen to my story, this might be the last chance we get, I think is poignant. It is on point. Like, the moments where he gets somber, I think are pretty good. But then there's the lines that he has to deliver in some of these scenes. And
there are the lines where Tidus is supposed to be excited about Blitzball.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know.
Those scenes are bad.
I don't know if it's the voice actor's fault.
No, I kind of am going to talk about this on my first post is I think that, okay, first off, my impressions of the voice acting is, number one, I think that this game is a product of its time. And the voice acting is just one piece of the puzzle that shows that it is a product of its time. Go back and watch any English dubbings of animes on the first or original run of Toonami and tell me that this is some bad voice acting. I don't think it's great, and I don't mean to come across as an apologist, but again, it is a product of its time. And look at some of the more skilled and experienced members of the voice acting cast, and even they are struggling with enunciation issues with all of the proper nouns and the script. It's a real wonky-ass script that they're working with. And you put any person in a high-risk, soundproof booth with no other people to work off of or method act with, you're going to have some awkwardness with your voice acting.
Yeah, and it certainly doesn't help that this is the first time a Final Fantasy game had voice acting. So a lot of things that, up until now, the little voices in our head made it work. And all of a sudden, a human being has to read something out loud, and it really changes. I think that the series has kind of never recovered from voice acting being introduced. I would say 10 is probably the best that they've done, honestly, with voice acting, personally. The proper nouns have gotten out of it. It turns out when you have enough proper nouns, it's hard to take a story seriously when people wax poetic about all this.
I dare anyone to say Summoner, Sin, Yevon, Xanarklin, all in one sentence 8 or 9 times.
Yeah, and they do it regularly. Or Albed, like all these different words, it starts sounding like nonsense. But I think on the whole, the voice actors do a very workmanlike job. I think that most of the characters end up coming across as fairly believable and endearing, despite a sometimes lackluster script and sometimes lackluster performances.
And that's kind of where I'm at in terms of my impressions of the game overall. When the game is trying to create character moments or story beats and decides to kind of push its need to subject the audience or subject you to exposition diarrhea, I actually find the emotional honesty of Titus to be really relatable and probably one of the continually rewarding aspects of the game. I really do like Titus when he's just being upfront and honest in terms of his emotions, and it's something to where you can at least understand where he's coming from regardless of the execution or the technical execution of the game. Well, one of my the clearest examples of that is when Titus is exiting one of the temples and then he screams in frustration. I love that scene because technically the technical execution of that scene is terrible, but the emotional honesty of Titus and what is intended for the audience to get out of that scene is so transparent that it works despite the technical limitations of it.
Yeah. And I think on the whole, the voice acting, it detracts in spots, but I think it's earnest enough, and the game is so, in a similar way to Final Fantasy IX, it's just so all in with its, I don't want to say honesty or like optimism, because there are some dark moments in this game, but it's got that, we're all going to put on a play. We're going to put on a play, we're going to have a good time.
It's very eager to please. It wants to impress you with around every turn and corner that it subjects you to. And that's my very first impressions, especially with the very first 2 scenes or sequences in Final Fantasy X, is that it is a game that is eager to please and is trying to push the PlayStation 2 to its breaking point.
Yes. So you start the game in Xanarkand. Titus, you get to name your character. I named him Titus.
Why would you ever never always keep the, as we have learned from the Final Fantasy VIII debacle, never change the names of your characters in a Final Fantasy game?
Unless it's Mobius Final Fantasy, in which case, who cares? Though the canonical name is, what was yours? Poor Life Choices?
Yeah.
Yep, that's the canonical name. But in Final Fantasy X, yeah, I took it kind of seriously. I was like, okay, whatever his name is, that's the name. Though there is a weird kind of side effect to the fact that they allow you to name the main character in that they never say his name.
Huh, I never picked up on that. Okay.
Yeah, they can't say his name, which, as this game goes on and some of the different storylines play out, it's a little awkward that, say, for example, if this, like all Final Fantasy games, resulted in some sort of love interest situation going on, one half of the love interests can never say the other one's name, which is weird. That's
a weird thing.
Yeah.
Now, before we go into Final Fantasy X, I have a confession to make to you. I think you already know this confession, but I think the audience should realize I have never played a PlayStation 2 game in my entire life.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to send you a PlayStation 2 so you could play Final Fantasy 9 and 10 when the time came. But then, thankfully,
I blew your mind.
Square released a PC game. PC versions of every single Final Fantasy game ever released, basically, at this point. So we don't even have to worry about it.
10 came out when I was in elementary school, and then 10-2 came out when I was in middle school. And I remember the PlayStation kids were talking about Final Fantasy X as if it was like the second coming of Christ. Like, it was a big deal when it came out.
Yeah, it was. As someone who played it when it came out, it's hard to reconcile how good this game looked and how impressive it was at the time compared to some of its contemporaries. There were like some of the cutscenes and some of the models in Final Fantasy X I would look at after playing some early Xbox 360 games, and I would wonder why people cared about the 360. I was
Especially
how much more powerful can it be? Look at how good these character models look in Final Fantasy X. Now, little did I know that, they do a lot of... One, Square was amazing at that point. Two, they do a lot of technical trickery to make those character models so good. Like, in some cutscenes, there are like probably at least three different versions of Titus that are used. There's like a low poly Titus, a high poly Titus, like a medium poly Titus, and then there's the HD, cutscene Titus, and all of them are different models. And
they look nothing like each other.
No, and sometimes they will switch between low poly Titus and high poly Titus in the same
scene. Yeah.
Yeah, someone will be talking, and all of a sudden they zoom in on the mouth, and it's the high poly model. It's crazy how they made this game look so good.
Some of the best map paintings I've ever seen.
Yeah, just bubblegum and shoestrings in spots.
It's mwah! Like you can tell it's a map painting, like a two-dimensional background skybox around you. But hey, they look great, so why would you ever care?
Yeah,
they're fine.
And some of the scenes they've managed to... most of the game is polygonal, but then some sections you'll still get these pre-rendered backgrounds like it was a PS1 game, and they hadn't figured out when they want to use one or the other. So like when you go to the temples, the main temple will be polygonal, but then if you go to the side rooms are usually
two-dimensional.
They're pre-rendered backgrounds. It's weird. It's a weird hybrid game caught in between two generations, but damn, it looks good.
It still looks good. I think you're playing from after having played the original version of Final Fantasy X. You're now playing the HD remaster, and my first impressions of this game are the HD remaster. And this thing is goddamn gorgeous.
Yeah, the HD remaster. It's impressive to see some of like Xanarkand with the HD remaster and some of the redrawn assets. So one of the nice things about having these pre-rendered backgrounds and static images is that when you redraw those things in 1080p, they frickin' pop in a way that they never did in the original, and some of the skyboxes become even more detailed than the original game.
There are some unintended consequences of that. Yeah. The first one is that when the game zooms in on the faces for in-game cutscenes, when they animate, the animation looks very stiff, and there's a lack of shading on their faces to make it look more realistic. The other major consequence is that the impact of those CG cutscenes is lessened because so much of the in-game is superior to it, or it's up to par with what we would see in a game today.
Yes, and all of a sudden, the acceptability of some of the polygonal models is actually pretty good. Like it matches pretty well to what you would expect. It's industry standard versus some of the cutscenes. They are uniquely, I would say, Japanese from like this era with very exaggerated movements in a way that you would expect if you were watching, a drama or something. Like there's a very specific type of acting that they're evoking.
Yeah, there were a couple of times where it's like, oh my god, Yuna just did the anime sigh where she leans over forward after saying her thing to someone she feels uncomfortable with. The game gone and done that.
Yeah, or like Waka's like just his mannerisms.
Sometimes. He walks like a big, bulging, like muscular guy that you would see. Yeah.
So it's just a little weird when there's this dichotomy between the kind of lower animation quality in the polygonal models versus the HD renders. And also it's a little weird in the HD version, something that I actually read an article on the subtle differences between Yuna's face from the original game and the HD remaster. But both Titus and Yuna, in their high-res versions, they used to look a little chubbier, a little bit fuller, and their faces animated a little bit better in the PS2 version, and the changes to their faces and hollowing them out actually, it made me want to play this game on the PS2 again. Because it's like a pretty dang noticeable difference. It's enough. I want to see the rest of the game in HD, just because I haven't experienced it that way before. But it's enough of a difference that, unlike with something like Final Fantasy IX, where I can just say the PC version's the one you should probably play from now on, or 8, same thing. I think with actually 8's got some weirdness with the PC controls, but.
Oh, man.
But I would say the PC versions are probably the definitive ones for those two games, especially if you mod the good music into the PC version of 8.
Maybe they should just port a better version of 8.
That would also be great. But 10, I think the character model differences affect the performance enough that you could make a strong argument either way.
Overall, it's a pretty good PC port. Yes. Overall, I still don't understand what international version means, other than the fact that they switch the X and C keys, and it's driving me goddamn crazy. But
so the difference between the international version and the U.S. version is, one, there are more languages. Obviously, in the U.S. version of Final Fantasy X, there was only English. In the international version, I think it was the version that was released to PAL regions, so it's got a bunch of different languages in there. But the big change was the different sphere grid. So at the beginning of the game, you get to choose between the default sphere grid and the expert sphere grid. The default one just kind of starts, and we'll discuss this. I was intending to discuss this a little bit later, but we can just go straight into the sphere grid now. The leveling system in this game is pretty dang unique. It's almost a board game. It's almost a board game. Or you could say there are skill trees, but every character is on the same skill tree, and they're just starting different points on it. But early on, at least, it's fairly linear. When your characters level up, you move them as far as
for some of the characters, it's linear.
Well, it's linear early on for everyone. You can branch a little bit. Kimari's the only character who's got any options early on.
At the very beginning, yeah. And his is actually one of the more intimidating skill trees, but luckily he's the blue mage, so I don't have to give a fuck about him.
Not true, but we will discuss that more. So the sphere grid, the way it works is each character, as they level up, you move them a space on this gigantic... It looks like a board game map, kind of. And when you move them, you kind of fill in the slots that they move to, and that gives them stat bonuses.
Yep.
Early on, you're just moving in a straight line. Occasionally, there will be spokes off of the straight line.
There are locks. There's empty spheres to put shit into. It's a weird thing. It's also, for someone who has never played this game, it is incredibly intimidating.
Yes.
At least give me that. I think that we're going to have slight disagreements about the sphere grid, but it is a very, very intimidating thing to look at if it's your first time playing this game.
Certainly. I had no conception of what I was doing the first time I played this game. I didn't understand because early on, especially before you unlock all the characters, you don't have any conception of what each of the sections of the sphere grid are supposed to be for, or why you would want to go into any of them, or why you would ever use one of the locks to move. But the thing is, when you have played this game, you have an understanding about what each part of the sphere grid kind of, how your character transforms when you move on to each part of the sphere grid. So the thing to mention is, Final Fantasy X occupies this weird space between the do whatever you want, like every character is a blank slate of something like Final Fantasy VII or VIII, and the hard rails of a game like Final Fantasy IX, which are all the games that you've played, so those are all the reference points. 9.
So tabula rasa or resolute or defined character classes or jobs.
Yes. So the way that 10 does it, I think, is pretty fascinating as a choice. You've got this grid that every character starts on, and they move through this grid as they level up. But because you're kind of put on rails early on, your characters develop in a way like a Final Fantasy IX character, where they have these defined roles in combat, because that's what section of the grid they start on. But at a certain point, you can branch off, or you can use special spheres to like move around the grid in a non-linear fashion, and then you can completely change what the characters play like. So they start out in these kind of like, early on in early battles, they will tell you, oh, this is a flying enemy. Wakka's good at killing those. And it's not actually because Wakka has a throwing weapon. It's because Wakka has higher accuracy than any other character. That's why he's good against flying enemies. They just have high evasion. As Titus gets higher in level, he will get higher accuracy, and then he can take those things down too. So it's just a stat that Wakka happens to start with a high version of that stat. Same thing with Lulu. Like, Lulu's supposed to be good against magic enemies because she can do elemental attacks. But it's also because her magic stat is higher than everyone else's. If you give someone a high magic stat and access to those same spells, they will be just as effective as Lulu against those enemies. You run into some enemies that have shells and have high defense. You need a character who has a piercing weapon to take those out. You'll eventually, I think Kamari starts with a lot of piercing weapons.
Uh-huh.
So the reason why Kamari is good against those enemies is not a trait intrinsic to him. It's a thing intrinsic to some of his weapons. So they managed to make this rock, paper, scissors system, but all of the different things that govern that rock, paper, scissors are things that you eventually gain control of and can break, which is fascinating in terms of character design, and it allows the game to start out in a understandable, kind of very rigid structure, and then maintain enough freedom to go nutso crazy later on.
I mean, equal credit goes to the developers for attempting to provide the player with the opportunity to customize the characters to their likings. I mean, I'm only 5 hours into the game, but I already have the sense that the various branches and pathways on the sphere grid result in noticeable changes in how characters control and play. And personally, I find it to be an appreciated change from the tabula rasa direction of 7 and 8. And the biggest positive that I've taken from the sphere grid is that I feel like it motivates me to take advantage of every party member, and I feel a sense of satisfaction in progressing and in developing each character as relative equals, regardless if I like using them or not. And that's increased my buy-in as a player with the characters that I'm given to play around with.
Yes, and the other cool thing is just that, like you said, it's not quite a tabula rasa. If you just follow each character's path till you get to kind of the end of their section of the sphere grid, and when I'm talking about the sphere grid, I'm talking about the default one, not the one that you can pick the expert sphere grid. The default sphere grid, each character kind of has their own spoke around the kind of perimeter of the grid, with Kamari starting in the center. And each of them will eventually kind of dead end into I think a level 4 lock. And then if you use a sphere to unlock that, they will just kind of start at the beginning of someone else's sphere section of the grid. So if you just stay in a straight line with Titus, you eventually end up where Yuna starts. If you just move in a straight line with Wakka, I think you end up where Auron starts. So these characters start playing like each other. They start getting similar stat bonuses. Kamari's the exception. He starts in a spot where he can easily move to Lulu's section of the grid, or Wakka's, or I think Titus's, or Riku's. So like all of these different, he has options early on, which is kind of crazy. But once you start getting these other things, you can customize these characters further, and it's surprisingly deep. So
I think we're ignoring the obvious.
What, that it's hard?
Yes, navigating the sphere grid is a chore, and the consequences of moving a character down one path or the other is not clearly articulated to the player.
Nope.
You're not going to know that until after you've done it. You realize you've changed or impacted your character significantly in the game, and if you don't like it, you are the one who has to go back and change everything. And you could have possibly used your levels and your spheres to move a character down a path that isn't to your liking.
Yeah.
And
Now,
it's incredibly annoying that none of these branches are labeled. None of these branches are color coded. None of these branches are clearly indicating what it is you're doing. Like the
yeah.
consequences or positives of any decisions that you make on the sphere grid, you have to go back, get into a battle to really understand what you have just done.
Yeah, you need to really stare at the grid, which is kind of a fault. Until you put a sphere in the grid, you can't. There's no good. I mean, the iconography is there, but you need to really just stare at the grid to perceive. Like, if you look at Waka's section of the grid, like where Waka starts, and use that as a reference point, you can see that there are icons for a bunch of accuracy sphere like boosts, and then you'll know that that his section focuses kind of in that direction. Or Titus's, I think there's a lot of icons for speed, just like his physical speed stat. And so, he's kind of the fast character. And so you have to really look at what these different things are. Like, Yuna has a lot of spirit, I think, which is like magic defense. Lulu has a bunch of magic power. And so each of these different, you need to like really focus in to know what's going on, especially if you don't know where each of these characters start.
And it's almost like in order to play this game correctly, you needed to have played it twice or 3 times.
No. That's definitely not true. In order to play it correctly, you can totally beat this game just going linearly with each character until you reach the end point, and that'll be towards the end of the game, and then you just unlock whoever the next... Like, you get to the dead end, and then you use a level 4 sphere, and you just keep moving, and it's fine. I did that the first time I played this game. I beat it without any trouble.
So if you can do that or different branches, then what's the point?
Of customizing?
Yeah.
You can get very different play styles. You can make your characters play in ways that are more efficient sometimes or more powerful, but you wouldn't know it. Or you don't need that. You don't need that level of customization. It's worth mentioning that in Final Fantasy X, this is the first game we've played where you can switch your characters on the fly. So even though
that is actually a great addition.
Yeah, you have a party of 3, but you can swap to any of the characters who are not in the active party at any time, as long as you've got a turn. And this is a true turn-based system, so it also doesn't cost a turn to swap characters. So if you find that you've just got the wrong people in, you could just immediately fix that problem. And every character who took a turn during the battle gets full experience. So the best way, or the most efficient way to play this game if you're trying to level up your characters, is to have literally every character take at least one turn in literally every battle.
Yeah, and I have been doing that, and I think that the consequence to that is that it makes even the most benign of battles elongated. And again, I approach this game from a different perspective. Guy who played more computer role-playing games and Western role-playing games. I think I would have greatly appreciated just a simple tech tree that had like 2 or 3 branches for you to funnel our characters down, like a traditional horizontally or vertically built tech tree. Because, again, the sphere grid is cumbersome. It's difficult to navigate. You don't really understand what you're doing. And the changes are massive without you really knowing it.
Yeah, and I would say my only counter to that is with this more complex system comes a lot more breakability and customizability. And when you're, as someone, I've learned how to speedrun this game. I haven't actually gone through with it yet, but I've got plenty of notes on how to do it. A lot of the high-level tactics of this game involves putting characters into weird spots in the grid early on and kind of sharing some odd skills and kind of customizing your characters in weird ways. So because you have that, like, there are some moves, like, for example, Riku has steal and use. Like, her grenade throwing thing from early in the game.
It's pretty powerful. It's
pretty powerful.
It's a pretty
and every
legit
character
attack.
can get that ability.
Huh,
It's
okay.
not unique to her. Anyone can learn it. Anyone can learn steal as well. So that means that later on, if you get items that are especially powerful, you can have it so that every character you control has the ability to throw stuff, which is
Okay.
pretty different, pretty unique.
Okay. Again, it's a unique thing. I think I still am trying to wrap my mind around it because of how unique and how intimidating and massive it is.
Yeah, and early on, this game does not make clear how flexible some of this stuff is. Every character seems like just this archetype, right? It seems like they should just have a tech tree. But the further you get in the game, the more that system kind of breaks down.
So would you say that we are 0 for 4 in terms of good tutorials in a Final Fantasy game?
Yes, this game is way too deep for the tutorial they give you.
It's a real quick tutorial. There are entire ideas where it's like, oh, don't worry, we'll come back to that. And it says, you can move the characters towards one another. What does that mean? We'll come back to that. And
figure it out.
Yeah. It places the burden of understanding its mechanics on the player rather than a burden for the game to explain and articulate.
Yeah. And so with that section of Sphere Grid talk out of the way, and the game has not even unlocked all of the mechanics.
No. Oh, no.
It has not. So without further ado, should we get to the story, or did you have one last bit about mechanics?
Oh, I was going to ask you. I'm playing the original soundtrack, and I think you're playing the HD soundtrack. I'm probably going to switch to the HD soundtrack. I don't know about your feelings about it, or I've gotten I really like the original version of Besaid Island, and I really like the original version of the Final Fantasy Prelude.
Yep.
But I think everything else, I almost always prefer the new HD version or the remastered version of the soundtrack.
Yeah, I like you, I prefer the version of Besaid Island, the default version of Besaid Island, and occasionally like a track here or there. But I think on the whole, the HD version is actually the rearranged version is probably better on the whole. But the nice thing is they allow
you can change that anytime.
Yeah, you can toggle at any time. So if you prefer one version of the track, you can just listen to that one when you want to.
So story, I think I'm gonna make a declaratory statement. I think Final Fantasy X has the best introduction we've played for the purposes of this podcast. That the first hour of this game is like a masterstroke of video game storytelling and a masterstroke in introducing the characters, introducing the player to this new world. I include Xanarkin and even kind of the first kind of moments with Riku in that.
Yeah, the immediate Xanarkin, you start out, the game just drops you in, and you are like signing autographs for fans. That's like your first introduction to the game, which is awesome.
It does a good job of like the neon nightlife of Xanarkin is so full of life, and it establishes kind of this eclectic world that you honestly want to explore. And certainly the NPCs are terrible. Almost all of the NPCs in this game are terrible, but they serve their purpose in establishing a sense of vibrancy to Xanarkin, and these establishing moments all kind of craft this distinct sense of place. It's a futuristic world with its own rules and customs, which includes Blitzball.
This high-tech society with highways in the sky, and I don't know if they're flying cars, I think, or like some kind of stuff like that.
No, but there's a real kind of Blade Runner-esque mystique when you're walking through the streets going to your Blitzball game, and you see kind of Jext's face on the billboard. I got a real Blade Runner-esque vibe from that.
Yeah, the giant electric... Yes. And after you sign the autographs and you start walking, and there's this sports radio commentary over the background, too, that
Which is great.
If you run too fast, you don't get to listen to all of it, but just like a guy reminiscing about the day Jack disappeared and how he ran away from home and he heard Jack disappeared, and then he came home and just had a long talk with his dad in a way that he hadn't in a long time because they both loved Jack so much as a blitzballer. And it's got this weird, it's such a specific sports culture call out, like this sports radio personality. And I think it sets the tone early that this is a game that is as much about the role of sports in society as it is about sin and religion and all of these other highfalutin Final Fantasy ass things, which is weird. It's a very specific sort of culture that is referring to there.
I think this is the one time where I actually like blitzball in the game. Is when it's just absorbing the culture rather than absorbing the actual game itself.
We'll find out. Maybe you'll love it. Maybe you'll try to form the greatest blitzball team on Spira. Who knows? So after you get to you run through the streets, you get to the blitzball sphere, the giant water sphere.
So the presentation is excellent. It sets this sense of mood and tone, this epic thing that's about to happen. It's okay. So the metal music is not that great, but it's
and oh my goodness, that song!
That song is a product of its time. It's clearly Japanese people trying to mimic death metal and kind of failing horribly.
But let me tell you, in the early 2000s, when that started, after all the other Final Fantasy games, and they didn't have many songs with lyrics, and it was just such a different tone than anything that came before it. And it's a different tone than literally every other song in that game.
Yeah.
There's nothing that sounds like that ever again.
Zero.
But man, does it set a weird tone early on.
I think, the other big thing about this first scene is that it sets an original, distinct tone where it's not beholden to previous Final Fantasy games, and very clearly the makers of Final Fantasy X wanted to craft their own Final Fantasy or their own version of Final Fantasy. And it
sets you in this world that's thriving in a way that all the games we played up until now, 7's a world that's kind of slowly decaying. Midgar is this high-tech society, but it's clearly flawed and fallen. 8, everyone's talking about a war that happened years ago. It's this kind of war-torn world where everyone's an orphan and the government's corrupt. And then there's the high-tech world of Esthar, which is kind of this own isolationist thing that immediately falls as well. 9 is all this referential stuff. You get kind of this build-up and then this downfall and then this, again...
the dynastic cycle of society.
Yeah, this refresh. And then 10 just starts out with a society in its peak, literally moments before it falls.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. It's a unique world, and until Titus goes up for that frickin' sphere kick, and then Sin shows up and just levels everything.
Yeah.
And when Sin shows up and gravity starts warping and everything just starts exploding, it's one of the coolest moments. This is one of the first games, I think, where the scale that Final Fantasy games tend to operate on, this kind of world-shaking, save-the-world sort of stuff, is really represented well in the cutscenes. I think 9 does it in spots, like the final attack on Memoria, or when Odin shows up. But there's something to Sin coming in and
just leveling the entire city that's just unparalleled.
Yeah, Xanarkand is a lot bigger and more beautiful than a single gigantic tree.
I think that, that's also one of the reasons why I love the introduction of Final Fantasy X so much, is there's a sense of scale. There's a massive sense of scale. So the city is huge, sin is huge, and it underscores how prominent the fall of this civilization is.
Yeah. And just some of the look of Xanarkand, like the gigantic wave that's like a stream of water that's just kind of flying through the sky, and
Yeah.
man, it's cool. And then it gets leveled, and you get introduced to Orin, who's a mysterious samurai man with sunglasses, and he gives you a sword and says, your dad gave me this sword to give to you. And then you fight Sin Scales. And that's a really tough battle, isn't it?
Yeah, I continue to be terrible at playing JRPGs.
Yeah, so the early battles are very easy. It's very hard to lose them.
Yeah.
And then you fight a boss that you literally can't lose to because it uses a gravity spell that does percentage-based damage.
Yeah.
So it can't kill you. And then immediately after that, you save at the save point, right?
No, I didn't. I didn't know what the save points were.
You save at the save point, right?
I did not.
It fully heals you.
I didn't.
So, you didn't. So
how'd
you do in the battle after the save point if you didn't heal?
I died in the first level of Final Fantasy X.
Ooh, that's a bad look.
I mean, where there's a will, there's a way.
It's true.
I think I've died in the first level of every single one of these games. I died at... Okay, so Final Fantasy VIII, I died trying to find out how to run, and I didn't know how to run, and I wasn't paying attention, and so the enemies killed me. And you can back me up. Run is like Z and R. It's like some stupid-ass combination of two keys.
With the keyboard controls, it's not great.
Okay, in Final Fantasy VII, I died on the Scorpion boss battle. I did that on the live stream for the Endurance run.
Yep, that's the first boss.
I didn't pay attention to you shouldn't attack it when its tail is up. I didn't get that part.
Yep.
Final Fantasy IX, Steiner killed me once in one of the initial Steiner battles.
That's hard to do too.
And now I died at the Sin Scales, which are the lowest level characters. It's literally the first enemy you fight in the game.
You fought Final Fantasy X rats, and they killed you.
I mean, the game doesn't even say, hey, these glowing blue orbs are the save point. I didn't know.
I mean, when in doubt, it's usually a glowing orb.
I also,
apparently.
Yeah, so I died, and apparently that's really hard to do, and people were impressed when I told them, hey, I died in the first level of Final Fantasy X. It's like, wait, no, you didn't. You're just lying. Like, you didn't believe me when I said that I died on the first level.
Yeah, I found it hard. Wouldn't you not believe you?
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
So, I'm not good at playing this game.
But that's fine. You learned from there. After I told you what the save points look like.
Yeah. I think it's great that the save points restore everything. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm tinkering around with this game, trying to figure out its mechanics, and I accidentally moved Yuna 2 spaces on her... I moved her 2 spaces backwards on her sphere grid, thinking that I needed to move the character towards the glowing ones rather than away from the glowing ones.
No, the glowing ones represent the ones you've already unlocked.
Yeah, so then I had to hard reboot that one.
Well, to be fair, you can move backwards 4 spaces, you move forwards 1.
I'm not going to lose a level to that bullshit. I am... Fuck the game, fuck that game, and fuck that game for not saying, hey, the sparkly blue glowing orb is something that you should save at.
Well, to be fair, sparkly blue glowing orb is pretty... You probably want to at least click on it.
Okay.
It's fine.
So there's 2 things that I'm not going to take shit for about playing this game poorly. One, it's the overdrives. They should fucking give you at least some sort of hint in terms of how to perform those overdrives rather than, hey, here's the minigame. Oh, wait, time's out.
It's so you eventually, after you do those the first time, you will know what they are. For Titus, it is always a
hit the X button in the meter.
The X button in the area. For
I don't know what the fuck happened with Auron.
Auron, it's always like a fighting game combo. You just need to perform the Raging Demon, basically every time. For Waka, it's slot reels.
Yeah, it's a fucking slot machine.
For Lulu, you just multicast. You spin.
You cast the same spell over and over again, but then it's
Yeah.
decreasing damage. So hers fucking sucks.
Well, you can cast it a whole lot of times. So if you get an elemental attack,
Or you accidentally select a status effect attack, and then
that's bad. You don't want to do that.
You wasted it. I wasted. Yeah.
Kamari's is just a single. You select a thing from the button because it's blue magic from a menu.
His is fucking garbage.
Yuna's just summons an Aeon with full overdrive.
Correct. And
So
that's actually incredibly helpful because you can fuck up any boss.
And then Riku, do you know what Riku's is?
I don't.
She has mix. She can combine 2 items to make a super item. A super attack item.
All right, we'll get there when we get there.
Yep.
I think another dick move in terms of the game is when there's a tutorial for equipment and the game equips items for a character to show you the ins and out of that system. If you go back and examine that character, which is Titus, the changes didn't stick. They weren't real. And
that's a fine holdover from Final Fantasy VIII.
It's a great holdover from Final Fantasy VIII. I cannot believe that this is the 3rd time this has fucking happened.
To be fair, when it's the 3rd time it's happened, they're not changing. They're not changing.
I'm just as obstinate about my expectations for tutorials that are never going to be met as Final Fantasy is obstinate about doing that kind of shit.
That you are. And so you don't die, hopefully, and you make your way to the end of Xanarkand. They give you some hints about battles with alternate wind conditions. So you need to attack like a car, and then you blow up a bridge. And then Auron tells you this is your story, and he holds you up to the giant undulating
alien
of
anus,
Sin.
And he throws you into Sin's anus.
And Sin whisks you away to another world.
We're also missing the weird, creepy kid that's hooded that's trying to drop weird things in terms of the story.
Yeah, he's saying cryptic shit. And you wake up in this abandoned, in the
decrepit
water surrounding an abandoned temple.
Yeah. That's populated by skeleton monsters.
Yes. And so you kind of swim up, and there's creepy birds everywhere, and there's lightning. It is a pretty striking environment. You go in there, you almost get eaten by a giant fish.
And I also like this scene because it just shows how far that he's come from his perch. He has a fall from grace, and he has to kind of pick himself up from his bootstraps. So the very first objective after you survive the giant skeleton fish monster is, I want to make a fire so as that I can get warm and potentially just relax. Because he knows that it's like the game has dropped down to the basic levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, and he went from basically Michael Jordan in future Blade Runner town to he's got a sword and nothing else. And he can swim real good in the middle of the wilderness. Or not the wilderness, but this abandoned ruin. So you eventually find fire. You get attacked by a boss, and then
Titus thinks it's a great idea to fall asleep in a temple that's filled with horrible monsters.
Well, he hadn't seen any horrible monsters yet, but then one shows up, and you then get rescued by Riku.
And her friends from the Albed. I like the interactions that we have with the Albed. I like the fact that the game attempts to craft this alien language. I feel like there's more to... Well, there is more to discover. There's the Albed primers and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a character replace language, so it's pretty simple. As you get the primers, it just replaces the letter with the English letter that it represents, which is pretty cool. And when you kind of talk to the Albed, I like that immediately, you're talking to these people who are speaking a different language.
Yeah.
So it's not just that you're out of... there's a physical change. There's also clearly a cultural change as well.
Exactly. I'm between two worlds in terms of Titus being the perennial fish out of water character. At one token, I think that it helps Titus being a vessel for the character to attach themselves towards, and
For the player to.
It provides an in-game justification for him asking questions in the game. The flip side of that is every single time that he asks a question in the game, it's just the fucking worst.
Yeah, it's usually a really dumb question. Question that no one should ask.
He lacks a level of social skills that a 4-year-old would have. I mean, every time Titus asks questions about Sin, Summoners, or Yevon, I just want to die. I just want to die.
Yeah, it's usually just the most tactless question in clearly the worst place to ask it. And so
And the worst part is when you are talking to Riku and she's like, you're a weird one. Hey, by the way, if we ever go to the other cities, don't mention Xanarkin. It's a holy site. Don't mention it. You're going to offend people. Please don't mention that. It could get you in trouble. And then he keeps mentioning he's from Xanarkin and he used to play for the Abes like 8 different times, man. What the fuck?
Yeah, he doesn't... To be fair, when they say fish out of water, being 1,000 years in the future and from a destroyed city, he's way the fuck out of water.
Sure, but at some point...
Speaking of great writing, the moment where he's like, I was out of the frying pan and into the freezer. That's just...
Fuck,
The
man.
writing gave him nothing. The writing gave the voice actor nothing there. So you fight with Riku. You beat this boss. You end up on an Albed ship. They enlist you to help them excavate some sort of underground ruin. Titus is just amazing at holding his breath.
He's Guybrush Threepwood. He can hold his breath for like fucking 20 minutes.
And he can swim really well. So you go. Thank goodness they captured a guy who's really good at swimming and holding his breath.
Thank goodness they caught someone who
with a sword
and capable of fighting.
Yep. So you earn your keep. You go underwater. You fight this gigantic octopus thing, and then you turn on the power in this underground facility. And the only thing you learn, because no one speaks English, is that they found an airship. They say airship in English.
They say airship. Titus is 1,000 years in the future. Xanarkin has been leveled. Basically, he doesn't know why, but he is not in Kansas anymore.
Yes. The tornado that is Sin has dropped him in Oz. And then after Riku explains all this stuff, Sin shows up. And I think in the HD version, I don't know if this is just the HD version or if I was seeing things wrong, but I think I saw the silhouette of Sin underneath the boat when he showed up. I don't know if that was the case or not.
I can go back and look at it. I don't remember that.
If it was, that was crazy.
There's one thing I kind of want to talk about.
Sure.
You were introduced essentially to Riku twice. And in both of those fucking introductions, the game decides that it needs to provide fan service by having the camera pan on her ass, zoomed in to where her ass is like 90% of the screen.
Yeah. Yeah. The camera ogles Riku in basically all of the female characters.
All of the fucking female characters in a way that is not cool. And... does the game introduce Waka with a camera pan hovering over his junk? Hell no.
Does it even hover over his well-kept pecs?
Nope.
Or his sick abs?
No.
Nope. But yes,
the biggest problem that I have with the fan service, especially with the female characters, is that when they are talking to Titus, oftentimes they have incredibly important information for us to process and deal with. And here's this giant polygonal ass in my fucking computer screen.
Yep. And she doesn't even have that big of a polygonal ass. She's pretty skinny, pretty petite. But the game decides to zoom in on it. And we will get some more of that with Lulu and with Yuna.
We'll get to that later.
It's not going to stop.
We'll get to that later.
It's not going to stop.
But
so
he falls off a boat. Wait, is the platform a boat or is he on a platform?
He was on a boat. He was on a boat. He falls off the boat, and then you end up in Besaid. He washes up on the shore of Besaid while Waka's blitzball team is practicing, and the ball kind of bops into him, and he picks it up and does a sick blitzball shot. Just the sickest. And they go, holy shit, we found a ringer, guys. This dude, he needs to be on our team. He needs to join our team. Who do you play for? Oh my goodness. And it's, yet again, that kind of sports culture thing where the sport...
The only thing from the old civilization that is carried forward, other than the language, is the fucking blitzball sport.
But because the sport has carried forward, all of a sudden this man from 1,000 years in the past can communicate with people 1,000 years in the future. And just because he's real good at blitzball. It's cool to think that unity of language would allow him to not just like communicate with people, but to thrive in this new world just because he's really good at kicking water like orbs. But hey, it works. Waka basically takes him back. He swims you back to Besaid, like the village of Besaid, and he basically says, "I'll take care of you. Just please play for my team. There's a tournament coming up. You seem to be really good at blitzball. Like, play for my team. That's all I ask. Maybe you should come to this tournament because maybe you'll know someone." Titus gives the explanation. I was near Sin. The toxins got to my head. And so Waka says, hey, come with me. Maybe you'll meet someone in Luca. There's this giant tournament. All the blitzball people will be there. And with you as good as you are, someone's going to know who you are.
Waka.
And then you learn about summoners. Yeah, and Waka.
Waka. He's
John DiMaggio. Does a pretty good job.
He does a pretty good job, other than the fact that he's fake Hawaiian and no one in this environment speaks fake Hawaiian.
Yeah,
so
he
falls into the Barrett category of having this distinct linguistic convention that no one else has.
Yep. I just imagine when John DiMaggio came into the booth and they gave him his introductory notes, it just said, fake Hawaiian, ? And that was it. That was all the direction he was given. And, he does a pretty decent job. And
he's not terrible other than when he's forced to interact with Titus, and he's functioning at a higher level than the voice actor of Titus is because of circumstance.
Yep. And Waka's also this kind of interesting character where on top of him being a athlete, the captain of this blitzball team, he's also a religious zealot.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, there's a confluence of religion and sport in this game where the prayer that he teaches you so that you can be with polite society is the old blitzball like sign for victory from 1,000 years ago. So the religion clearly has co-opted some of the trappings of blitzball culture from 1,000 years ago.
In a real weird way.
Yes. It's explicitly taken it
in
up.
A way that is clearly benefiting a certain religious organization.
Almost like to keep the masses placated.
While this giant monster is destroying society.
What if the only thing we protected was this sport that gave people hope and kept them distracted?
It's as if the people in power are trying to fill a void in the lives of the everyday people.
I don't know about all this. This is crazy. But in Besaid, you learn about summoners, and you eventually go to the temple in Besaid.
Oh, fuck.
What?
Oh, God, the fucking puzzles.
Well, before the puzzles, you learn about summoners, and Titus again offends everyone with blasphemy.
Yeah,
then,
fuck, man. Come on, dude.
You learn that the summoner who has been praying at the temple hasn't come out for like the last few days, and Titus gets worried about her and runs in after her. And you have to then solve some puzzles. Puzzles aren't too bad in Besaid, though it is a radically different type of game. The Cloister of Trials.
these. I guess I'll quote Jeff. Who is saying like, "Hey, role-playing game developers, why don't you put in these non-role-playing flavors into your game?"
I don't know who is clamoring for it. I think it's a decent change of pace. It's not like clearly it's a low point for the game.
They're so fucking boring.
Yeah, they don't get much better, and some of them are weirdly physicsy eventually, so it's not a good look. But some of the items you get from the Cloister of Trials, they're generally much better than the items you can buy or earn at those stages of the game. So that's kind of cool. But
I really like the design and the artistic design of the cloisters, especially when you start to get into the inner sanctums of them, because it seems and comes across as if like part of the civilization that Sin destroyed is alive underground. I just wish that there was more interesting stuff. I wish that we were gaining something as we progressed through those cloisters of trials. Like we were uncovering secrets about Sin, about the culture of Spira. But no, instead, I'm moving these orbs into these slots to open up doors.
Yeah, there's this sense of mysticism in the cloisters that I enjoy. Like the music is really weird and off-putting, and it almost felt vaguely horror-ish, and maybe it's just because it sounds like a Silent Hill game in those sections, and that kind of causes a little thing in my brain to twinge. But it feels weird and kind of ancient and mechanized in a way that the rest of the world doesn't, and there's this kind of physical mysticism that you're interacting with.
But you're not really interacting with parts of the environment or the game doesn't even take the time to connect what you do in the cloisters with the greater world. I feel like
it's all contained within the cloisters. They're
isolated
things.
That's one of my biggest problems with it, is that we do what is in the cloisters for the sake of doing it, and there's no greater connection in terms of what we're progressing in the greater world.
Yeah, and that's a problem with them. But they're these weird bits of connective tissue between the temples and then the rooms where you get the summons. So once you solve the Temple of Besaid and you get to the Chamber of the Faith, you find Lulu and Kimari. Kimari is not thrilled that you're there. Waka comes in and he's like, it's not cool that you're here. Lulu is very
that's the second one. You're talking about the second cloister in Kilika.
No, in Besaid, they're there too.
Okay, sure.
She comes out and says, I'm a summoner.
I'm a summoner. Okay,
become
cool.
a summoner. And she falls down, and then Kimari catches her.
Sure. Okay, got it.
But Lulu's like, who the heck is this guy? And her dress made of belts. Should we talk about her dress made of belts?
Sure. She's wearing a dress made of belts.
A low-cut top, a dress made of belts, but there are belts missing, like, over her leg to reveal that she's wearing, like, a garter belt or something, just in case her outfit wasn't weird enough.
So the fan service in this game is fucking gross.
Lulu might be Tetsuya Nomura at his worst.
Probably my least favorite part about Lulu is like whenever she gets the finishing blow in a battle, she bends over ever so prominently so as that her cleavage becomes like a prominent part of the camera or what's on the screen.
Yep.
And, you know, the best part about that is while Riku's ass shot is one scene, this is a gift that keeps on giving. It's the pits. It's the drizzly shits of Final Fantasy X.
Yeah, it's weird. And unfortunately, her physical attacks are cool because she makes a little Moogle run over and kick dudes. So that's unfortunate. But, man. This game in spots.
Man. It's like 90% of the women in Besaid are wearing weird bikinis.
And most of the dudes are wearing loincloths.
And then we're going to talk about Bikini Lady you meet that's the evil summoner that's the rival to Yuna.
Donna.
Oh, God.
Evil Donna. So you get Yuna. She joins you. She's super interested in Titus because she hears that Titus is from Xanarkand,
Of course.
and her father was the High Summoner, and Jecht, Titus's dad, apparently protected her dad. So she believes Titus in a way that no one else does. When she comes out, she summons this gigantic bird monster, and it's cool. Like, she is the only character who can summon. That's one of the only things that that is not tied into the sphere grid. She is the only character who will ever get to summon. It's one of the only things that is story specific. So once you get her into the party, Titus has an awkward moment with her at like a feast to celebrate her becoming a summoner. They flirt a little bit, and then Waka's like, "You're not going to put any moves on her, right?" And Titus could be like, "Yeah, I am," or, "Nah, she's not my type."
Dialogue choices that mean absolutely jack shit are one of my favorite tropes in Final Fantasy games.
I think there is a relationship score in this game. It changes some dialogue here and there in like a Final Fantasy VII kind of way. I don't think there's a specific cutscene you get if you direct, Titus towards any of the female characters, but I think there are some slight dialogue changes. It's not like the scene at
fucking whatever.
What is it? The gold saucer.
Mm.
But yeah, if you say, "Yeah, Yuna's my girl," there will be some slight changes. Very slight.
There's an elephant in the room.
Is it when you fall asleep and then you have that dream sequence?
We've skipped over, I think, maybe one or two dream sequences, but they are all...
This is the one that's the bad one. All of them are bad.
They're all a fucking pile of flaming trash.
Cry, cry, cry. That's all you're good for.
Oh, God. Like, the voice acting is terrible. What is attempted in the scene is kind of... it's such a bad scene. Because... I don't know. I think there's going to be an Oedipus complex in this. And I don't want there to be an Oedipus complex.
I don't think there's an Oedipus complex, but there is definitely... Titus definitely has hang-ups about his dad. He has this dream where he needs to... Riku is like, "You come with me to Xanarkand," and Yuna's like, "You come with me to Xanarkand." And then his dad shows up, and they both leave him, and they're like... And he's like, "Oh, you with a woman? Never." And then it cuts back to Titus, and he's a child. And then the two ladies that he likes cheer him on and tell him to talk back to his dad. It's a really weird scene. Man, symbolism, subtlety.
But it's like the lowest of all hanging fruit is, I hate my father and want to carve my own path, have my own destiny, not have my father be the reason why I have this destiny.
Yeah, but it's also kind of... I mean, we don't know too much about Jecht yet, but I think it's pretty clear that he was not he's not an evil man, but he was not a good father.
He was not a great person.
Yeah. He was definitely not a great father, at the very least. He was a great blitzer, something, but he was not a good dad. And so Titus is... It's interesting in the context of these games that Jecht is not... He's not evil, he's just not a great dude. In the way that Baku is kind of not a great dude in Final Fantasy IX. They're both kind of these abusive father figures that raise these main characters that have mixed up relationships with women. Though Titus, I think, is a little bit... He's less of a chauvinist than Zidane. So after you wake up from this, the whole party leaves Besaid, and you head towards Kilika, which is the next island. You get some time kind of bidding Besaid farewell. Yuna thinks she's going to bring a gigantic steamer trunk to give gifts. Oh, and you also learn about Waka's brother, Chopper.
Yeah, there was a scene where the Waku and Lulu, where Lulu's like,
Waka
no.
And Lulu.
Look, man, I've been mispronouncing names in Final Fantasy games since we recorded the Final Fantasy VIII podcast.
That's true. I'm just here to correct you. Partially memorable.
I really liked the scene with Lulu and Waka because it highlighted how there are relationships and character dynamics even before Titus gets here, and the game develops those dynamics as the story progresses.
Yeah,
and there's a sense of familiarity, like the dynamic between Waka and Lulu. Man, I almost did it right that time. Waka and Lulu is great because you can see that they trust each other even if they don't always agree with each other's techniques. Like when they have the opportunity to just confide with each other, you can actually watch them confide with each other.
Yeah, and you also get a little bit of an idea of why Waka is so taken with Titus. Lulu mentions, yeah, he looks like Chapu, but he is not Chapu. So Titus looks slightly like Waka's brother. So that is part of the reason why he's so invested in this kid's success. So after that, you leave Besaid Island. Tearful goodbyes all around. You get on a ferry, and you meet the true star of the game, Owaka, I think the 23rd? Or the 13th?
Yep.
I think it's Owaka the 23rd. But he's pretty great. He asks you for a loan, because one day he's going to be a big merchant, and he'll pay you back. You want to pay him. You want to loan him some money. He will eventually pay you back with discounts. You learn that the ships are run by Chocobo power.
Yeah.
And is there anything else on that boat? Titus takes some binoculars and ogles Yuna.
Ogles Lulu.
And doesn't he?
Yeah, he ogles every woman on the boat because, what a great human being.
Yep, and then Sin attacks the boat. Or he doesn't attack the boat, he passes by the boat.
He passes by the boat, and I think that battle is fucking great because the camera dynamically shifts between multiple scenes. Whenever you impact the battle or make it progress further, the scene and what happens there changes as well. And there are multiple phases to the battle. Man, that battle is great. It's, again, a clear sense of the game providing a spectacle. And the spectacle pulls you into the world. It kind of highlights how, wow, Sin really just pops out of nowhere and everyone has to pull their shit together. Otherwise, they're all going to die.
Yeah, and I love that the reason why you're involved in that fight is that Sin is heading towards Kilika, and the people on the boat say, our families live there. We can't allow him to just go to Kilika. We're sorry, Summoner. We're sorry, everyone on this boat. But if we die and our families live, that's acceptable for us. And it kind of sets the stakes of the world of Spira very early on. That this is a world that is not just... It's not primitive. It is a world that is constantly under attack and constantly rebuilding. And so nothing can really get done because the pieces of edifice are constantly getting wiped away by this roving natural disaster. And it makes this game... This I think, is the most Japanese of all Final Fantasy games.
I would agree.
And not just because when you get the HD cutscenes, the characters look distinctly Japanese. It's that this is a game about a series of islands that are perpetually hit by gigantic natural disaster that's basically a tidal wave that just wipes out everything.
Sure.
Yuna wears this dress that looks like
a Miko for a Shinto temple.
Yes, and
she performs Shinto practices like blessing the spirits with a wand or a staff that looks very similar to the staff used to scare away yokai.
And Auron has his kind of sake bottle and his...
He looks like a samurai.
Katana. Yeah. And so this moment with the fishermen using these harpoons to stick into Sin, and then you fight it. It eventually pulls away. Titus goes overboard. You fight this weird blender jellyfish Sin spawn, and then you arrive at Kilika in time to see Sin level the city. Basically
he destroys almost all of Kilika.
Yeah, he shows up, and it starts with kids playing with a blitzball, like
Yep.
kicking it around like a soccer ball, and then this gigantic wave of energy comes, just decimates trees, blows people away, and then everything gets sucked up into this giant spiral above Sin, and then he leaves, and all the bodies kind of come down, and you get this shot of a blitzball bobbing in the water. And it's a striking scene. It's one of those moments where, like,
the game
9,
has a target, it throws its dart, and it hits its target almost perfectly.
Yeah, like in 9, the suffering and the cost is real. And in this case, the target is, rather than a human being bent on destruction or someone overcome with greed, it is a natural disaster.
Yeah.
Basically. When you arrive, Yuna is asked to almost immediately, Waka and all of his blitzball teammates start to set off to repair the town. And Yuna has to go off to perform a sending.
Yes.
This is where we learn a little bit about the theology.
The theology, the context, and the practices of the world we're in.
Yes. So when people die in Final Fantasy X's world in Spira, they do not actually have to die. They don't have to stop existing. The dead will linger. They're dead, but they can still walk the earth and interact like normal people.
And that is a very Shinto Buddhist idea or concept, is that the dead do wander among the living. And that they need to be blessed to find everlasting peace and tranquility.
I did not know that. That's good to know. So, without being sent, they will wander and eventually will become overcome with their hatred of the living and become monsters. So every one of the fiends that you fought up until this point used to be a person who was dead.
Yeah, and when you know this information, you start to piece together what that impact is, because when you kill the monsters, they burst into kind of little puffs of energy, neon-colored energy. So yeah, the scene where Yuna is performing the exorcism or the blessing.
Yeah, the sending is what they call it.
It's probably one of the best scenes I've seen in a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, it's pretty striking. The music, the swelling kind of... they basically play the main theme, which is... not the main theme, it's the Yevon kind of song. With her dancing and above... Well, first she walks on water over these casks.
With these giant, like, red spider lilies, or these flowers, and as she's walking into there, all of the people in the city that are alive are crying, like, very visibly and audibly crying.
Yeah,
and she
is over all the caskets of their loved ones and starts dancing, and as she dances, like, those pyreflies, those little spirits start to leave the caskets, and the water kind of swells underneath, and as she dances, she gets raised higher and higher into the air. It's a striking scene. It stands up. Man, it's really good. And after that high point, you go to sleep. Titus has one of, I think, his best lines in the game. Like, her dance, I think he says, like, her dance was beautiful, but I knew that I never wanted to see Yuna dance again.
I wish there would never be a next time.
Yes. Okay. That's the line. Yeah, it's a great line. And you wake up, and then you have to go to Kilika Temple.
Yeah.
Did you save? There's a kid who's, like, crying.
I did save the kid.
building.
I saved the kid. That was pretty cool.
Yep. That's pretty cool.
It's almost like the game sabotages its momentum. Almost.
I mean, then you get basically a dungeon. Heading to Kilika Temple, there's basically a dungeon, which is Kilika Forest. You can find some items in there, and then you fight a sin spawn.
There's also the giant fucking purple monster that you don't want to fight until after the fucking temple.
Yes, there's Lord Ochu. You don't want to fight him. Then you fight a sin spawn. You learn that
you learn that Yuna's kind of starting to take to Titus, and this is starting to break up the dynamic with the current Guardians. Like, they don't want Titus, they just want him to leave so as that they can just continue to protect Yuna as their God-given right to protect Yuna.
Yeah. They don't like that Titus is interloping. You also learn that Waka, another reason why he likes Titus is the idea that Titus is from 1,000 years ago. He's starting to think that maybe his brother didn't die. Maybe he was just sent forward in time.
Yeah.
And Lulu does not take that kindly. The idea that his brother would be alive someplace else.
Lulu is the skeptic of the group. And is the one that requires, other than Kimharu, did I do that right? Kimari, they both want nothing of this dipshit's tomfoolery with...
Oh, yeah. We forgot to mention that when you meet Kimari out in Besaid, he, like, attacks you. And
he pulls out his fucking spear, and he's like, it's murder time. You touched Yuna. What the fuck?
Yep.
Got to defend her honor.
Yep. But in Kilika, you do learn that one of the high summoners from Kilika used to be a blitzball player for the blitzball team, and so a bunch of blitzball players go to pray at Kilika Temple and run up these stairs because that's how the high summoner used to train, which is kind of cool. Again, mixture of religion and
sport. How they've started to blur, yeah.
Yep. You fight this monster. You go to the temple. There's another cloister. You meet Donna and her...
Oh, God, Donna. Fuck. God, her fucking character design is atrocious.
Just all boobs.
It's all boobs and bikini. You're also forgetting we meet Cobra Kai for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
How could you forget that we missed Cobra... How could you miss Cobra Kai?
The Luca Goers,
a.k.a.
my God. Cobra Kai.
Oh, God. So it's two of the lowest moments of what we've played so far. Evil Blitzball team, which their voice actors are fucking horrendous.
They're perfect.
They're so bad.
They're so perfectly bad.
Holy shit.
Oh, if it isn't the Besaid Snorlax.
And you know what that kind of highlighted to me? It highlighted to me in the remaster that they clearly put in a lot of time and effort to up-res all of the main characters. They didn't put a single goddamn amount of time to up-res any of the other characters. Because there's a real...
goers don't deserve it.
There's a real weird juxtaposition between, like, them and then, like, all of the polygonals on Titus's face or Yuna's face. And then you go to these fucking assy-looking... Like, you can see the pointed edges of their hair. Oh, yep. Their dialogue is the worst. The worst?
I mean, they're just a shitty sports rival. That's what they are. They are no more, no less. They don't get characterization. They are there to talk shit about you. And then you were supposed to play them in the high school gym at the end of the movie, and then kick their asses.
And then you get the girl, and then you ride off into the sunset. You saved the park. Now it's not going to get turned into some sort of oil field or whatever.
Johnny keeps sweeping your leg, but then you use the crane kick, and you take them out. So that is what they exist for. You go, you talk smack to them. You mentioned that you're going to win the tournament this year. Oh, Titus's shitty protagonist, like...
We're going to win! My optimism is so heavy-handed that you can fucking...
What's our goal this year, guys? To play our best? No, victory.
Oh, God.
Victory! Oh, this weird subplot.
Oh, this is a bad subplot.
But in the A plot, Donna and her boy...
Boy toy.
What's Boy Toy's name?
Barthello.
He picks you up and puts you into the cloister, basically, because she wants to, like, ruin Yuna's chances of being the better summoner.
So, yeah, like, there's a sense of religion and camaraderie, and, like, it's this unifying force, and yet here's this summoner who's trying to ruin the career of another summoner.
And their goal is to defeat Sin, so they should be on the same team.
So yeah, like both of them have the same goal, and
instead of cooperating, they decide to have this stupid
be
rivalry.
competitive and take credit from another person. It's almost like Donna isn't an exemplification of the religious beliefs of the religion we've just been presented.
Yeah, and you definitely get a sense that since Yuna's the daughter of the last High
She's
Summoner.
the golden child. She's a blue blood.
Yeah, so that's why Donna does not like her. And Yuna has this crew of people doting on her to protect her, and Donna's basically got one dude. So you can understand why she's a little bit snippy, but she's kind of just... she's so thin as a character that they don't even investigate that. So you go into the Cloister Trials again. Did you get the Destruction Sphere thing?
I did get the Destruction Sphere because you told me I needed to do it even though I didn't want to.
Yep, you did it. Great. I mean, there's a summon that you can't get without getting all of them. And I will tell you when you see that summon which summon it is. So you get into the Cloister again.
And they are fucking pissed.
Yeah, they are not happy you're there. Lulu's like, what the hell? Kamari's like, what the hell? He will shove you when you go towards the door.
I actually did that three times in a row because I thought that animation was so cool. He's like, man, what the fuck? Get back. And then he shakes his head.
Yep. And then Yuna emerges. She has a new summon that Ifrit. He does fire stuff. And you leave Kilika after that. On the boat.
No, there's one scene I wanted to talk about. It's the scene where immediately after you get Ifrit and immediately you come out of we've already kind of talked about it. There's a weird juxtaposition where like Titus is finally coming to terms with the fact that he is not at home and he's probably never going to go back. So he exits the temple and he's like, man, this kind of reminds me of that time when everyone would cheer me when I played blitzball. Huh. I'm never going to have that feeling ever again. And Yuna looks at him and is like, what's wrong? What do you want to do? It's like scream at the top of my lungs. And he does.
He screams.
It like I said, it's technically, the technicality, it's not a great scene, but it is so emotionally honest that I appreciate it nonetheless.
Yeah, Titus basically just has no filter. But most of his emotions make sense. So
they're also very clearly telestrated to the audience.
Yeah, I mean, he has an internal monologue, and then he'll have his external monologue, and then he will just kind of... He feels a lot. He feels very much. So you leave Kilika, you get on the little boat, and on the way out of Kilika, on this ferry, there are a couple of scenes you can see. You can meet a Waka again. You can get a bunch of potions, I think.
The scene with Waka and Lulu is amazing. Like,
yes, but before that one, let's discuss the scene with rival Blitzball with Cobra Kai.
Fuck! That scene is something, man. Holy shit.
Oh, Lady Summoner, hello.
It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Her job is to defeat Sin, and you're going to treat her like shit and hit on her and sexually harass her?
And she's like, I believe he's from Xanarkand. And they're like, oh, sure he is. Xanarkand surely isn't rubble. Yeah, that scene's shit. Those people they suck so much.
They suck so much, and then the dialogue between
Lulu and Waka?
No. Yuna and Titus is so fucking stiff. It's like, I believe in him. And it's like it's so heavy-handed, and the game paints with such broad strokes that
Yeah, it's clearly someone reading some lines in a sound booth. They don't transport you to another place. Then you have this amazing scene with Lulu and Waka kind of talking out some of their differences. Waka talks about Titus maybe becoming a guardian and whether he should become a guardian or not. Then Lulu is like, Yuna clearly wants him to, and ultimately it's up to Titus whether he's going to make that choice. His dad was a guardian, was Lord Braska's guardian, so maybe he'll make that choice. And then they have this, that's some cool exposition, I guess.
It is.
But then they have this conversation about Titus's right to hate his father.
And then there's also the discussion of how Lulu and Waka don't really remember their parents.
Yes, and that, I think, is the most poignant part. That, again, crystallizes how much this world is just constantly on edge.
And
that
broken and destroyed.
Yes. Titus is... He at least got to know his father well enough to know he didn't like him. Whereas Lulu and Waka's parents both died long before they were even full adults. So they had no conception of who their parents were. Because sin has attacked so many times that there are entire generations of people who don't know their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Which this marks, I believe, the 4th out of 4 Final Fantasy games we've played where everyone's an orphan.
Yeah.
Basically.
I think that it also, the reason why I appreciate it is that there is a sense of friendship and camaraderie between characters that are not just based around the protagonist. Like, we actually see, for what I think is the first time, like, characters in the supporting cast hitting it off with other members of the supporting cast, and there's a sense of camaraderie with them. And it creates a sense of community with the people who are helping Yuna and Titus progress on their adventure, that they have a raison d'etre, a reason for being beyond they like the protagonist.
Yeah, I think Vivi and Aiko had a couple scenes. I think Garnet and Aiko had a couple scenes. Freya and Amarant had a few, but not to this level.
No,
like,
yeah.
There is a depth of the relationship between Lulu and Waka. Not only did these characters exist before Titus showed up, but they very clearly will exist after he's gone, and their relationship to each other is much stronger than their relationship with him ever will be.
Yeah, and they also feel comfortable enough to confide with each other, and it's visually reinforced, and it's reinforced again and again.
Yeah. And it's nice to have this group. And this is one of the first games where, I guess there's a little bit with Avalanche in Final Fantasy VII. But this is one of the moments where the fish out of the water main character is walking into an already established group.
Yeah.
And kind of getting to learn its dynamics. Whereas Cloud in FF7 is just kind of a wrecking ball who comes in and assumes control of Avalanche.
Yeah, there's a real sense that Titus needs to gain the confidence of everyone beyond Yuna, and through his own hard work and efforts gains their trust over time.
Yes. So
he doesn't feel like an unearned protagonist like Squall.
Yes. And he tries to earn their trust.
Yeah, he much like how this game works very tirelessly to impress, Titus is trying to impress the people around him. I think part of that is part of his character, at least this is my impressions of him, is that he seeks out social interactions and he's a social butterfly. And one of the reasons why he feels so at odds with the current state of Spyra is he doesn't have the social interactions of fame, and is trying to relive that fame in this new world. And the fact that he doesn't have it anymore really eats at him and frustrates him.
Yeah, I think that you're made to understand that. And so, after having
some one bad scene with one really good scene, it's time to have another bad scene.
It's time for Titus to defeat the ghosts
of
his past.
Demons of his past.
His dad, who always doubted him.
By kicking a soccer ball.
He had this shot that only he could do. And he said it was the Jack Shot Mark III. But there was no Mark I or Mark II. He was just a dick. He came up with that name just so that the fans would show up. That asshole.
That fucking minigame. Ugh.
It's pretty easy with a controller.
It's on a keyboard. It's fucked.
I'm sorry. Did you get the Jack Shot?
I did get the eject shot. Do you know what I did? Okay, fun story. Fun fact, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to call me a crazy person, but Gino, I think at this point you already think I'm a crazy person.
That's fair.
I took a piece of binder paper. I divided it into quarters. And then I wrote the controls for each of the corners of where I figured out where each of the dialogue prompts would be or pop up on the screen. And then I drew on their basic location what the keyboard prompt would be to make that word disappear. And then I duct taped that piece of paper onto my computer screen.
So, is it not just press up,
no,
left, up, right?
It's upright, right C, down right, left, up right, left, right. Yeah.
And then you just press C to get rid of the words, right?
Sure.
So it's just the direction plus select.
You know, I was going to lead to the second part of the story where I finally parsed out what the language is that they were trying to say. So now I had this piece of paper that was taped to my computer screen, and I realized what a horrible mistake I had made.
Okay. Yeah, on the controller, you just kind of point the analog stick in the direction, and then it goes away when you press X. You need to get the haters out of your head.
By performing this blitzball kick. Why does the ball come back to you after you kick it, Gino? Why does the ball kind of have this boomerang effect?
So the cool thing about the Jack shot is when you use it in an actual blitzball game, he wangs dudes in the fucking head with it. So if there's a defender trying to block your shot, you will hit them in the face with your first hit, and that will knock them out of defensive position. So you just get a clear shot on the goal. It's actually a really strong shot in the game. It allows Titus to basically take a one-on-one and turn it into a one-on-none.
And there's a scene between Yuna and Titus where...
Actually, you might take out two. I think you just take out one dude. But...
You know what? The scene that between Titus and Yuna after he performs the Jack shot is well done. I got so frustrated I never saw what the scene was when he kicks the ball and fails and fucks up. All I know is that the scene is completely different.
He just falls, and then Yuna, the part where all of the Aurochs are really impressed with you doesn't happen, and then Yuna comes over and says, "Oh, that was you were trying to do the Jack shot Mark III, or the Sublime Jack shot Mark III, or whatever," and then they have kind of the same conversation.
Yeah, whatever. But
yeah, Yuna says how you should revere your father and revere your parents, and Titus is like, "I earned the right to hate my father."
I earned the right to hate my father, but also there's another line of dialogue where he causes Yuna to be more introspective about herself, in that he says, "Well, you had to live in the shadow of your father. What was that like?" And she's like, I never really thought of it that way, but I feel like I have a giant burden on my shoulder.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to pick away at Yuna's facade. Like, she's able to keep all her shit together for much of the introduction of her in the initial moments in the game. And Titus is kind of slowly but surely picking away.
Yeah, getting her to rebel
a little bit and show a more vulnerable side of herself.
And question some of the stuff she's been taught.
Yeah.
So then you end up in Luca. And in Luca, they mention, again, it turns out the gigantic blitzball tournament is being held in the name of Yevon, the religion.
Yeah.
Hey, religion and sports intertwining again. And it's to celebrate the Grand Maester, like the Pope, one of the popes. Just his birthday, I think, or his anniversary of being a Maester. And then Titus gets a megaphone. I love what they say about the Aurochs.
They're so bad, it's a statistical anomaly that they're this bad.
They are a walking statistical anomaly. No team has ever been this bad for this long. It's amazing. And then Titus grabs a megaphone and says, "This time the Aurochs are gonna win."
Oh God, it's everything that's related to Blitzball is bad.
The goers are gonna be goners.
Oh God, it's so bad.
Yeah, and that's where we stopped.
Yeah, that's where we stopped.
So, any predictions?
Okay, sure, predictions. Okay, prediction number one. I don't think. Wait, are we making predictions for our next episode, or are we making predictions overall?
Your call. You always.
Okay,
decide how you're
I will
making
decide.
predictions.
So we're gonna do Luca, and then I think 3 or 4 more. Actually, I'll just let you draw a line in the ground, and I'll keep playing. I'll get it done. Surprise, surprise! I think that they're gonna win the Blitzball tournament. That I'm gonna make that prediction. I'm gonna guess that we have. I'm trying to predict how many more people are going to join our party. So Riku has to join our party. I think Sunglasses Dude has to join our party. Oh, fuck. If I had actually counted the sphere grid, I would know the answer to this. I think they're the only... I think this is going to be a small cast. I'm going to just say that it's that Oron Dude and Riku.
I mean, that's not that small of a cast. That's pretty comparable to...
Sure.
9.
I am going to predict that Sin destroys Luca. I am going to predict that Titus has a real awkward social interaction with Jecht in Luca before the destruction of that city. I would say, I'm trying to think of like tropes that we haven't seen yet. I'm going to guess either a Moogle or a Chocobo will be seen or used for our next episode of the podcast.
That's always a good bet.
Always a good bet. And I'm going to do my Hail Mary pass. I am going to guess that one of our party members betrays us. And I'm going to go with Lion-O Kimari.
Kimagi.
Kimchi. Let's call him Kimchi. I've always called him Lion-O.
That's fair. Okay, there are your predictions. So, I think for the next episode...
Get through Luca.
Definitely get through Luca. There's going to be a temple after that. There's going to be some other stuff. I'm going to say we probably want to stop after Macalania.
What?
Write that down. There's a place called Macalania.
Macalania? What the fuck?
Yep.
How spell it?
Ice place. Just say ice place.
Ice place.
Ice palace.
Ice palace.
Ice or ice temple.
Oh man, there's so many. There's so many proper nouns in this game. It's fucking crazy, dude.
And it doesn't jump out at you quite as much until they're saying all the proper nouns all the time. But Macalania is... It's the ice... There are 2 temples, basically, coming up. There's the Thunder Temple and the Ice Temple.
Let me guess, the Thunder Temple is going to be some sort of wooded, forest, palacey looking thing.
Nope.
It's on the top of a mountain?
Nope.
Okay.
It's actually a pretty cool location.
All right.
Yeah. And the Ice Temple.
All right. One more thing before we call peace. Are there any side quests or side journeys that you want me to start developing during this period of time?
You, if you so choose, can play Blitzball more. That is your call. I would say don't do it, but you're a lunatic, so I can't really stop you. There is a side quest. After you leave Luca, there's a long kind of section where you're walking, like along. It's not a dungeon, but it's like you're on a highway.
Yeah.
There's a summoner kind of off one of the sides of that highway that you can talk to and challenge to a one-on-one battle between Yuna and that summoner.
Uh-huh.
You should do that.
Okay.
She is a recurring character. She's kind of cool.
Fuck it. So if I did do the Blitzball stuff, how much time would I be looking at of losing my life?
So, the thing with Blitzball is once you gain control of the Blitzball team, you are the GM and a player.
Ah, fuck.
So you can actually recruit people.
Uh-huh.
Like regular NPCs, you will gain the ability to ask if they want to join your Blitzball team.
But is it one of those mini games where it's kind of infinite, like both of the card games we played, or is there a hard end to it?
There are finite. So unlike the card games where you're there's no rewards for Final Fantasy IX's card game, but in 8, each card can like be its own reward. In 10, the rewards are from you winning like Blitzball tournaments, and the prizes are a thing that you know what you're getting. The big prize for Blitzball tournaments are limit breaks for Waka.
Great. So a fundamental part of the
overdrives.
game is hidden beneath this bullshit minigame.
It's not a fundamental part. You can go the entire game with Waka's first overdrive, and you're perfectly fine. It's just his upgraded overdrives, and eventually an item that unlocks the true potential of his ultimate weapon is in Blitzball.
Fuck.
So like the ultimate weapons, you can get the weapon, but then you need 2 signets basically to give it its full mojo. You found one of them, the one for Yuna's, like when you swam up to Besaid Island.
What?
Usually one of them is found like in the world somewhere, and then the second one is associated with some kind of mini game, generally speaking. So if you want to play it, it's fine. But the kind of crazy thing about Blitzball, and we'll talk, I think we should just save the Blitzball talk for after you've Blitzballed. Let's just save it. There's crazy stuff. So you can play that if you want. I would not recommend it. I think you should see the summoner on the high road. Other side quests. I don't think that you definitely need to get the destruction spheres in every temple.
Okay.
Because there's a summon that you're going to want to see, and you can't get it without getting all the destruction spheres.
Okay.
So I think that's everything, though. I think that's all of Final Fantasy X up until the Ice Temple, I think. So, till next time. Thank you.
Till next time. So, for our wonderful listeners, gonna just put it out there. I think Final Fantasy X is better than Mobius Final Fantasy.
Yo, word?
Word, son.
Okay, cool. So, till next time, if you want to get in touch with the show, at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got our comment sections, and hit us up on email, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you, Zombiepie.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'm always going to be here. I'm stuck here.
Till next time. Yes, you are. Till next time, peace!